It looks like Africa, to a greater part, has this problem of where a lot older people are so inclined to like staying in power rather than living into the future generation. Is it an African problem, or is it just power problem?
I would really need to put things into perspective, because to the extent that the world looks at it as an African problem and points to the likes of Biya and Museveni and president of Equatorial Guinea and the former president of Gabon, Omar Bongo, a number of these dudes who had been around forever, people use that as empirical evidence to show that maybe this is an African problem. But remember, most of those people were enabled through this Western-style democracy, through the geopolitics of the Cold War, that needed these puppets to be in power. That is why the CIA itself, it is on record that it played a role in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And the CIA and America, by extension, then went ahead to completely support Mobutu Sese Seko, you see. So when Mobutu Sese Seko stayed in power for that long, it was actually largely because he was enabled by the West because of the Cold War scenario. When people like Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, democratically elected, was frustrated by the same global geopolitics of the time, because the African socialism that he preached was perceived as being a chapter in the communism book, you see. So imagine if Mwalimu Julius Nyerere had not been interfered with, had not been suppressed globally like he was, and if that experiment of African socialism had then completely risen head and shoulder above all other forms of governance, of course other African countries would have followed similar footsteps. But now Tanzania itself points at Kenya. The naysayers would say that, you see, Kenya's economy is much better than Tanzania, yet those underlying dynamics were a big problem. So the issue is not the longevity of reign per se, because even Xi Jinping is now becoming, quite a long-serving. They have changed the law in China to just allow him to go on forever. A number of these monarchs, in an absolute monarchy, it's until you die. But so we shouldn't just look at the longevity per se, but we should look at the underlying structural issues in this governance, and where we should take responsibility. For example, the isms of nepotism, tribalism, let's take responsibility. Because if you're going to vote for somebody just because they're from your tribe, then yes, that's your problem. And yes, we have to deal with that. We have to look at that log in our eye. But as we do so, can we also realize and acknowledge that if you happen to have an extremely high fever because you have a malaria virus in you, it's not helpful for me to just look at that fever alone. I have to go and take out that virus. And one of the viruses that is in the African governance today is that whole-scale copying and pasting of Western-style democracy. Yet, even America itself, Brian, doesn't vote the way we do. They're the kings and queens of Western-style democracy, but they have an electoral college so that they can give power to the small states just like the big states. So if they had to come up with their own system that works, they shouldn't preach to Africa to just copy everything, you see. So the onus is on us Africans to begin changing this Western-style democracy with a hybrid solution that truly works for us.